Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. So by the end of my active addiction, I had like one friend in my city that I could call on, talk to. Otherwise, I was not a social person. I avoided social situations like the plague. If I went into a social situation, it was exhausting. You know, 30 minutes of trying to make small talk and I'd be exhausted. And that's what I considered it, small talk, dismissively. I would think that it was such a waste of time to stand there and talk to strangers about the weather and just silly things like that. And one of the big problems was that I didn't have a genuine curiosity about other people. Uh, I didn't really care about other people much beyond what they could do for me or what they could get for me. So, in recovery, one of the biggest blessings that I've had has been the development of a genuine curiosity about other people. And I'm not sure when it happened, but somewhere along the way in my recovery, I started to become genuinely curious about other people to the point where I now love going to parties full of strangers, for example, and rooms full of strangers and just introducing myself to people and starting up conversations and then just seeing where they go. I can talk to any particular person for an incredible amount of time because I don't tend to run out of questions to ask about their lives. And if I maintain a genuine curiosity about the person, every answer that they give me leads to some other question, typically, unless they're purposefully trying to get me to leave them alone, which honestly doesn't happen that often. Because if you are expressing genuine curiosity about someone else, typically they enjoy that. That makes people feel good. Now, it used to, I dreaded going to parties. I hated going to parties and making small talk, and I thought it was such BS, and I would much rather be at home by myself doing something I enjoyed doing. And this was really a way for me to avoid fears that I had. And the big fear I was trying to avoid was fear of being rejected. I was worried that peers that I went to, people that I saw at parties, were going to reject me in one way or another, either by not wanting me to be their friend or not wanting to talk to me. And this wasn't a fear that I went in super conscious of, but it was a fear that drove that behavior. And in working on my step 4 of my AA program, that was a fear that emerged, was that I was really afraid of what my peers thought of me, and that was driving a lot of the isolation behavior that was a big part of my active addiction. And that was a big part of the reason that I didn't have many friends at all toward the end of my active addiction. So I had to figure out, how do I remove that fear? And it's not something that I can just turn on and off. And that fear is really coming from a place of, I'm afraid that, people don't really know who I am. And what I have found is the best way to get people to be curious about who you are is to be curious about who they are. And once you start to look at the world as people you would like to get to know, all of a sudden some really magical stuff starts happening. And some of the, I was a very condescending person in my active addiction. I felt like I was, much higher than other people. I felt like, that's not a great way to put it. I was a lot higher than other people, but I felt superior to other people, and so when I express curiosity to other people, when I start asking them questions about their lives, I find out things that help me understand common ground between me and people that might seem like they're very different from me. And that gives us a way to relate. And when we start to be able to relate, then friendships, relationships develop where they never would have. But it takes me doing something. It's and that's the other part of this, is that I used to expect people to just magically be my friends. That's not the way it works. You have to work to develop friendships. You have to work to instigate friendships. And so it's a really, really important part of my recovery. That the reason this came up is this past weekend I was at several social events where I was thrilled that I got the opportunity to be the person engaging with people, asking them questions, and met several very like-minded people who otherwise, 2 years ago, when I was in my active addiction, I really would have avoided talking to. I really would have tried not to talk to anybody more than I had to. And I would have tried to find ways to be off in the corner by myself, looking at my phone, not engaging with people. And the great thing about it is, and it took me being willing to get out there and put myself out there, but now in my recovery, I don't have to even force myself to want to do these things. I have a genuine curiosity about other people that compels me to go to a stranger at a party and start asking them questions about themselves, start learning about them, finding similarities, and establishing the common ground that can turn almost any stranger that I see into someone that might end up being a lifelong friend. That's a beautiful thing about recovery. Not something that I ever thought I would do. I always said, oh, I'm an introvert. I just don't like parties. And I think that introvert a lot of times means something a little bit different than what we think. So, this was clearly, to me, my lack of being social before was less about my personality, more about some of my fears, and a lot about my selfishness and not wanting to really get into being curious about other people, what makes them tick, and expressing that in a way that makes them want to know more about me. That's it for today. Hope you have a good one. I'll be back tomorrow with more.